Coming for this kind of first fireside chat with Mark, as they already told you. So, as he said, in this fireside chat, we'll go through everything of like his roots, but the Langfuse story, but also like his thoughts on current AI developments. In the end, you will also have the chance to ask some questions. So if something comes up in your mind, you can write it down. You can ask later. And I will start right in with like stuff I found on you online. So if there's something wrong, correct me, and we'll follow up on that. So so you started with a bachelor's in business administration at WHU, which is like a big German business administration university. Then at your master's, you kind of switched from a full kind of business background onto a more kind of CS focused thing when you went to TUM, right? And then pretty much right after it, I didn't found like a full-time role. You can maybe later elaborate on what you did in between, because there was a year gap, I think I saw on your LinkedIn, but I don't know what you did there. Then since mid 2022, you did Langfuse. You were in the YC Winter 2023 batch. I think, do all of you know what YC is? Yes, some, yeah, okay. So it's like the biggest accelerator and most famous accelerator program on the planet. You raised 4 million, led by Lightspeed and GC/La Familia. We will also elaborate on that. And you're kind of de facto the leading open source LLM ops tooling. You have the team in person in Berlin. You have still kind of big presence in San Francisco. You kind of have a global user base, and we will also go into that. Is there something that was wrong? Is there something you want to clarify?
Nothing factually wrong.
No, okay. I'm glad. I'm glad, because there wasn't that much. I found one podcast we were on before, on product, which was just recent, but there was not a lot on your backstory, just on content. So, the first question on your personal background. So, what was the decision from like doing this really like operations heavy business administration bachelor to like you going into technology and management master at TUM, and what was the reasoning, and how did you get into more the kind of dev space?
Yeah, I think like, hi everyone, thanks for hosting me. Generally, like during high school, I was like programming like early on, had like a very good CS teacher, like a mother that was very encouraging, but then I feel like there aren't that many like role models that are technical, but still like entrepreneurial, that go for something big in Germany. So I felt like more drawn to the business side, where people were like ambitious, building things or doing things. And I just had like better role models in this direction than the technical, because the technical felt more like boring or more like execution than like building something really big. So went with the business side, but they're always like more like data problems basically on this side, and also all my kind of like more like junior internship experience was all very then like rather technically driven, and my research work as well. And but then realized like everyone else is like leading to like consultancies, and me myself, I'm not drawn into this direction. I think it's like good careers, but not like where you build something yourself, or where you see like something scale. So, but I really understood that I want to build something myself, and that I want to like meet the best potential co-founders, the best technical talent, and heard great stories via Forto and Eric and Michi, that basically CTM and TU Munich are great to meet these kind of people while being here. Because again, I think like coming from Germany, it's not clear that you can just move to the US, go to Stanford, get into like the like existing network, but you feel like you need to find it here. Like I didn't know. And very happy to have moved to TU Munich to more like a technical background. But I think there again, it's less about the content at university, because I feel like I knew much of it already. But then it's more about the people that you meet around there that are like wanting to go into consulting basically. And after my like master studies, then met my co-founder there, my current one. But I knew that I want to build something myself. First started something with another friend, like walking the idea maze of different problem spaces and kind of like prototypes, but nothing really catched on. And then I was basically ready to quit, get a job. And I think like 2 weeks in, Max, my current co-founder and CTO, reached out and was like, hey, Mark, I've been like now 2 years at Trade Republic. like you always talked about like starting to build a company together. Like I'm finally ready now. Like, are you still down to try another time? So this was basically the year of building, but really not building anything great. And then we started summer of 21, I think, 22.
Okay. I wanted to ask this because you're not building Langfuse alone, right? You mentioned your co-founder Max, but you have another co-founder, right? So what was the origin story there, and was like, and you can also add on what Langfuse is actually doing. I don't know if everyone knows it, so you can also take the chance to kind of tell them. But like, where have you started also in terms of product, and what was the kind of pivotal story into what you're doing now, and also with your third co-founder Clemens?
Yeah, initially Max basically brought the team together because Clemens and him knew each other for like 10 years. And he just knew that in the end, this would be like a complementary kind of like mix of people. Very glad that he did. We started off with a couple of ideas. In the end, tried to build like a usage-based billing system, more like classic SaaS. Got into YC, first week of YC, realized it's a bad idea and it needs like years of building. And in the end, I mean, Stripe can do it. And we now use Stripe usage-based billing, and it's kind of good enough. So the suite wins. And happy that we pivoted. Then during YC, realized that we really want to build with LLMs. Went through like a ton of ideas. Built like a course generator that you can input like any topic and then get like a kind of like micro course and like a Duolingo style. Like an autonomous web scraper where you just put in what kind of output you want to have, and then it browses the web until it found this kind of structured output. And finally, more like going from GitHub issue to pull request, because we felt like we really want to use the GitHub mobile app to just note down like some ideas on a GitHub issue and then see like a PR coming in, and we just can like merge and see how things change. But in the end, realized like it's really hard. And back last year with GPT 3.5, maybe possible to like build for this, but then like GitHub was just launching features with GitHub Next. We felt like we're like at a data disadvantage. And the tooling that we've built might be even more interesting because everyone around us in YC had the same problems of actually building something beyond a demo, because the demo was really cool and very compelling to have like GitHub mobile app, write down, make my website go confetti, and then you can just merge it and show to friends on a hike and be like, this works. People were blown away, but then like, how do you actually sell this? Like, who needs this if it can only do like simple things? And why wouldn't GitHub win here with like the bundle that they already have? So yeah, then we saw like many builders within our YC batch that built with LM APIs. Initially thought we built something in testing, but then realized that people want visibility. So now maybe the summary of what do we actually do. We started with observability, which is basically like a mix of like an amplitude and like a Datadog kind of product, because we really wanted to have like traces similar to like more like traditional observability, but we wanted to have like SDKs so we can use them for like more of a data sciencey process of evaluations and pulling the data to then like semantically group them, like to actually understand what do our users do, what works, and how can we improve it. While the LM application is often like multi-step of like a lot of internal reasoning, chained LLM calls, which really makes traces great as an abstraction. But like it's more of a workflow than traditional observability, where it's more about extracting metrics and reporting like time series charts and getting alerts. So that was our initial idea. And then, yeah, we started with observability, and by now I'm more like a workflow tool, which has very API-driven open source at the core. And we are then getting more and more opinionated about the common workflows that we see to help people accelerate the process of building LM applications, because it's always like, what do my users actually do with it? How does it break? And does it actually work? And is it too expensive? Like many like common problems.
Okay. I mentioned before that after or inside your YC batch, you also raised additional funding from 2 funds based in the US. So what was the idea behind like raising from US funds, raising also from, I don't know, maybe some of you don't know, like Lightspeed and GC are 2 multi-stage funds, which means that they kind of invest in like very early companies like you were at this stage, but also like in investing 50 million at a, I don't know, Series C company. So what was the rationale behind that, and the story, also your fundraising? I also know that YC companies also have a little bit different fundraising environment from like everyone else. So what was that like?
Yeah, I feel incredibly lucky to work with people that I trust. because like the partners I work with have known them for a long time, and in the end, both GC and Lightspeed have strong takes on the market, know what they kind of think about this, because we had like a lot of like demo day conversations where like I had this slide that was basically like, why will this market be big? Like LLM tooling, like helping people build applications. If someone isn't like primed with this idea coming to a conversation, there's no way that this meeting will end well. So I think we're incredibly lucky to work with people that get open source, get this market, have a really strong take, people that we trust, and generally just understand open source and observability and the whole space.
You mentioned the LLM tooling market. So how would you structure this market, and like how does it actually change with like evolving models?
Yeah, big question. I think I mean, I need to ask myself, will this be like a big problem going forward? Because otherwise I waste my like years of my life building something that will become kind of useless in the future. I think the thing, how we think about it is more, even if models stay the same, like there's a lot of like use cases to be built, especially in the enterprise and large organizations, to really automate workflows. And in the end, it all comes down to measuring quality, building trust in the application, hedging for the security. And all of these problems don't really go away with improving models, because maybe with improving models, you need to prompt engineer a little bit less, or you can just like manage context a little bit less well. Similar to, I don't know, if CPUs become more performant, then you need to worry less about how bad your program is, because in the end, you just cope for it with better processing. And I feel here probably the same to some extent, where having people build trust in application still needs like visibility into quality, visibility into costs, visibility into security risks, and then being able to iterate on this while being able to monitor for regressions as you make changes. So I think the workflow of building things doesn't really change that much. Like the macro problem, yes, what you actually do changes, but the problem doesn't go away. And then why is it big? I think like there's yet still like so much to be created, and it's like the best time to basically build something. And like most of these things aren't built yet, and also they like what we see isn't rolled out. So still so much to be created. It's a workflow problem actually, putting like LLMs into like applications. And then if we get anywhere close to traditional observability of like maybe 5 to 20, I don't know, big range % of infra spent on tooling, if we get to anything close, then this will be like a huge market to build tooling for it.
And why do you think you are the ones who kind of build this next $10 billion kind of observability tool? Because I mean, you mentioned Datadog, they're like, which is huge, right? So why can't they do it? Because you mentioned before that the other things that you pivoted away from, like Stripe could do it. Why could Datadog didn't do it? And why do you build a $10 billion company?
Big question again. But I think our view is basically that this kind of problem is like a multi-stakeholder problem. You have like not only like we initially went for developers, but now like how do you build an LLM application? You need like developers for like the productionization of the use case, to make, I don't know, rag work, this kind of whole architecture, to quickly build different kinds of architectures, benchmark them. But then often it's like a domain expert problem where like a PM or some kind of subject matter expert comes in to actually understand, does this make sense? Can we trust this? Also, like evaluation, like usually the developer can't do evaluation by themselves. Then you have, again, like the humans in the loop that did the process before it got augmented or automated that you need to loop in. Then you have management who want to see charts. Like it's so many people. And it's like very distinct from ML ops, which is usually ML engineers, or ops, which is usually SREs or ops, or like the data science landscape. Like all of these tools or product analytics, yes, Amplitude could maybe do it as well, because it's kind of like you want to understand how the application works, but then again, it's like marketing and product more, or growth. So I think just it's about like which kind of people do you build for, and do you see like, I don't know, like a subject matter expert that helps iterate on prompts? Do you see them logging into Datadog? Yes, potentially, could always be the case. But I feel like for now, it seems to be like a very distinct category that moves very, very quickly. So I feel like it's more about the category that moves very quickly, and then the different kind of niches within the category that happen right now.
Okay. We mentioned YC before. Do you think YC is, and if so, why is it the best kind of alumni network and also accelerator there is? Like, why is like, why are they so far away from everyone else in what they do?
I think the alumni network that you mentioned feels to me personally like the biggest asset of it, because like we build open source developer tooling with like a global audience which covers like startups, enterprises in like a very nascent space of LLM applications, where YC gives us access to like basically who are our friends. They are like either building LLM applications at the cutting edge, or they build open source developer tools that are very similar go to market. So basically it gives us a way to be friends with people who have very similar problems, to then learn and just be fast and not having to make the kind of like findings all by our own and like reinvent the wheel, even though they're like playbooks, or there's like something to just learn from like seeing how other people do it. Or then being able to just have the trust of someone who builds an application that they at least try your product and give you feedback early on, because they're like, okay, I know if I get into like a Slack Connect channel with them and I give them feedback, then they'll ship it for me tomorrow if I make a good case for why I need this. And this kind of trust and like good community is really valuable. And in the end, does it like, can you copy paste it? Probably not, because if you just have like one magnet that attracts like the top of market, then like is it like then like a market of lemons if you build like another one? I don't know. I just feel like it concentrates a lot of attention, but I feel like it's just for global or US based software, or like that's at least I think you could build something in Europe which is focused on more regional problems, on like not purely software, because I feel like for technical talent it's really good.
Okay, and YC starts with like a 3-month on-site program, right? And I know from other people I know who were at YC that they have data that startups who stay in the Bay Area after the batch is over perform statistically better than the ones who go back to where they're from. Why have you chosen to like build an on-site culture here if your chances are lower now?
You question whether they are lower, whether there's a causality in this. But I think my main take here is that, or what do we need to do? We need to build product, and we need to kind of like then work with our community to make this big on a distribution like financial standpoint. And building takes focus, not burning out, hiring the best engineering talent. And this is all for us working very well here in Berlin, because we know really good people here. There's not that much competition. Like if you want to be like an engineer, build something ambitious, open source developer tools, like there aren't that many like teams you can work with. And for me personally, like it's family, friends, basically just long-term thinking where I want to be. And I can easily travel to SF like 4 times a year to meet customers, be engaged in the network, while not being distracted too much from it, because here it's just like waking up in the morning, taking the bike, going to the office, going back, and doing this every day. So it feels like very much flow state here.
Okay, so you kind of benefit from a weak ecosystem of ambitious startups.
Could be. Maybe you then have again like more, maybe it's more power law, where there's like more outlier driven, which then concentrates maybe attention. I don't know.
Okay.
And like side benefit, if you have like a global audience, like working with US or as a developer, many people like to stay up late at night. So at least that's my rhythm. It's very easy to work with on Pacific time, but like being in Pacific time and trying to work with Europe is kind of impossible during working hours. So from Europe, you can kind of like do like global support if you want to, which is kind of like a nice side benefit.
And you said that you don't think that there's causality in these numbers from YC, or
I just wanted to say like in numbers generally
Oh,
very
yeah,
difficult
but
to make
do
a
you think
causality.
there is? Do you think what could be the factors that influence like this data, right? Because I also talked to several people about this, right? If it's about like, oh yeah, the most ambitious people stay in the Bay Area, so it just has this kind of nudge in a way that, okay, yeah, the most ambitious people are just the ones who turn out to be the most successful ones. So it's not about the location actually that changes your success, but just you choose the location based on how ambitious you are. So what's the kind of, what do you think influences this?
Yeah, I think what we are missing out on is like if in SF I could easily like every week organize like a dinner with other people who have exactly the same problems that I have and who I admire for what they built, which is more difficult to do here.
So that means your chance of success are lower
This is
in this kind of like for this factor, right?
This is like
so
something you give up for
okay.
something else.
Okay, yeah.
Where then the question is whether the net result of it is positive or negative.
You already mentioned this. So is this, because I want to ask, what is the thing that you would take from this kind of SF Bay Area ecosystem and plug in here, which is also kind of like something that could be possible, right? Because we try also with the guys from LLM Studios, right, to make some events happen, to kind of take this part maybe and make something possible. But like, what do you see there? Because you spend way more time there than I am. What do you see there that you would be like, okay, yeah, we should take this, make it possible here?
Yeah, I feel like the city was built for people like us, whereas in Berlin you feel more of like a transplant maybe, where generally in SF there's like, I know I made some notes because I like the question, where I like optimism and technology, generally ambition to build something big, actually understanding software and not just talking about it, or like openness to approach people with influence. So if someone has built something big, I don't know, $10 billion company, if you feel like it would make sense to talk to them, there's like a way to talk to them. Like you can either code outreach, or there's like really this kind of like how to like make like an easily forwardable email that you can then forward to then get like an intro. Like it's easy to meet people even though they've made it. Whereas here, I feel like it's probably less easy to talk to someone who has built like a very big company. Maybe because there are less big companies, so you don't strike luck that often to meet like a Decacon founder kind of. And yeah, many people here aren't that excited about technology in general. I feel like at a hackathon, you don't meet the very senior people that still have lots of side projects that you meet in SF. And I guess Europe is more decentralized, which might be good for cultural aspects or to have like diversity. But then if you are in startups or in tech in the US, you mostly move to San Francisco. So you have like the strong network effect of a single city, where if you scale as a company here in like Europe, you need then like a Paris office, London office, Munich office, Zurich office, because either you can't make everyone move to Berlin. Like there isn't this one city, which is, I feel like Europe would benefit from like a single hub where people move to, because you can still stay in Europe, but get the benefit of a hub.
You now said a lot of things that are bad, but like, what is the thing that you see we could change or like plug in here? Like, what is the, if you would need to say one thing, because you mentioned, okay, the hub, it's not really possible to change it, right? It's also because of, with a lot of cultural stuff you mentioned. So is there one thing where you would be like, I've seen this there and it would be possible, but just no one is doing it? You can say no if you don't have an answer.
I feel like there are not many like entrepreneurial, when you look into CS at university, it's less entrepreneurial, where in the US, I think many people from like Stanford directly like start a company right out of the bat, where I think there are not that many role models that try to attract people who are technical right from university to, I have no idea. But this is my best take on it.
No, it's a good one.
This is kind of like something that's missing, because here, basically, if you want entrepreneurial engineers, they all have some kind of like econ aspect, that they found econ or business somewhat to be interesting. And then they are kind of like a hybrid that makes them like entrepreneurial and good, like either founders or first hires, where I think in the US, there are way more entrepreneurial, like CS bachelors that think big and build something.
Yeah, that's true. I can just add on this that I tried to make partnerships with technical universities in the city, and it's not easy. So yeah, that's true. You mentioned that Langfuse is an open source tool. I guess all of you know what open source is, and so, but why did you specifically choose to do it? At what point of the journey did you do it? And what were the kind of things that you considered, pro, con, in terms of also making it a commercial success?
Yeah, I think the good thing is when you start out, you always assume that whatever you do right now doesn't work. So we were just like, okay, if we were users of this, we would want this to be open source, and we want to partner with other people and integrate with them. And these packages are open source, so probably we should be open source as well. Like whatever, it's kind of like 1 week effort. Like it always starts with like a 1 week hack to launch something, so you don't attribute any value to it, and you're just like, let's put this on GitHub, and if we can get better feedback by developers on it, if it's open source, because you can just give them like the GitHub link and like the README, then let's do it. So we don't need a website, which is cool. But now it's kind of like we more iterate into this observability aspect than the platform that I mentioned earlier, And having this open source at the core, like we feel very strongly about it, where if you trace your LM application to then run evaluations on it on your whole workflow to understand what works, what your users do, there's like a strong data asset. Like you really want this then for fine-tuning in the future, for data exploration in the future. You want good APIs. You might want to self-host it if it's like, because in the end, if like people put their own, like if a user chats with it or somehow like an open-ended input field, it can be anything. It can be credit card information. It can be very sensitive. So many, at least like regulated startups or enterprises want to self-host it, where open source just makes this easier again. And yeah, so there are like lots of advantages of being open source, and we feel like the open sourcing the core aspect of what we do makes a ton of sense. And our view there is basically that we differentiate between the core, which is the observability piece, all of the data model, all of the APIs, all of the core UI, all open source, and we add some kind of like opinionated like workflow UI only features on top. So for example, you can run evaluations via the API or add user feedback via the API, like, or view all of the evaluation data in our dashboards in the UI, all MIT licensed. But then, for example, a very common workflow would be to use, for example, an LLM as a judge. And then you would just have like an external kind of like pipeline of always fetching data that you saw and that you instrumented from prod, run it through an LLM, and then put the evaluation result back into Langfuse. And we now build this as like some kind of like add-on service, which has like a commercial license. But where people don't feel strongly about this being commercial, because it's kind of just, okay, now we don't need to build this ourselves as the platform team. We can just use this as is. And if we ever feel like it gets too expensive or it's not like what we want, then we can still use the open source core of what Langfuse does, build our platform around it without any kind of like platform risk. So we feel it's like extremely honest. We don't need to kneecap the open source product. So it's like unlimited, same performance as our cloud product, and very, very fair, and being able to like work openly with so many companies.
Okay, and now you're not at the stage anymore that you're a 1 week hack project, but you try to commercialize this. So how do you see the split of like bottom up dev community work and like doing serious enterprise sales at this stage of your company?
We like the, I think some companies that put out good content on this. I really like, for example, Post Hoc, which stress that building good product, building good documentation, building like something that scales also with regards to like customer support. For example, on all the documentation pages, at the bottom, there's this kind of like FAQ section. Or like the roadmap, people can vote on it, contribute their own, like wherever you can take something that's like 1-to-1 and make it like 1-to-n indexable, searchable, it ends up in Google again. So we try to lean very heavily into this, because building a good product seems to be easier, or like entertaining a large user base that is mostly non-monetized is easy if you scale all of what you do, and it makes the product better for the large companies that want to pay a lot of money. So we kind of do both. And in the end, we mostly focus on building the best product, having the best documentation, and doing the community work, because everything, the whole rest of it is based on this. And the better the documentation, like the less I need to do, or we need to do basically customer support with large companies as well, because we can then still like sell, for example, a support SLA. But like, I mean, it's good for our cost function if we can sell hundreds of these without actually needing to hire like 10 support engineers. So I think open source just makes the product that much better, because like all of the edges are kind of like taken out. We have docs. All of the bugs have already been found by someone who's like basically like a QA tester out there that's contributing to the project by contributing a bug report. Yes, there's like this kind of any update on this, or there's like this kind of like meme style GitHub conversations about it, but it makes the product better if someone has already tried it, if we then bring it into like an enterprise context. I think what's interesting here is that like a large organization really wants to talk to someone, wants like SLAs on like talking to us, or then maybe need this kind of like one add-on feature, or want, I don't know, application level encryption, which doesn't matter to anyone picking us up open source, but some people just need to encrypt the data again within our application. And this is like an like simple feature that we can add, make it enterprise only, commercial, and thereby kind of like add value in addition to support. So we kind of focus mostly on what's there in open source, but then very product-led get into very large enterprises.
In the last years, working with a few commercial open source companies, I came across a few people also very experienced ones who said developer first kind of bottom up marketing will not bring you any enterprise size tickets in sales. What's your opinion on that?
Usually saying it's different here is a bad answer. But I feel like it's different here because you have, how do these organizations work? Usually there's like a strong mandate from all the way on the top to like push the AI agenda of an organization. So you have someone like a VP of something who is very, very like incentivized and has a strong kind of mandate to do stuff. And then you have like a very small technical team who has like, who champions for tooling. But you still have the security and procurement processes of like a large organization, which makes it difficult to buy stuff. Meaning, if you build very good tooling, which you can mostly adopt bottom-up open source, like it gets you very easily into these kind of large companies. But then still, you're very close to decision makers with large budgets. So I think this space, like I bet on that this works, and I have strong confidence.
Okay, moving a little bit more to kind of away from the LLM tooling and more into a general AI discussion. Do you think in the next 10 to 15 years, it's going to be possible to build like generational defining companies, $5 billion plus outcomes on the app layer?
Probably the question is, probably you can reframe it to like how much of this is verticalized in the end and kind of like really applications? How much is it like a model level kind of value that's created? Like how much is there to be a company to be created on top of like a foundational model that's just provided by someone else or that's open source? And from our perspective today, I would say there's like so much to do because I don't know, like a big insurance company, they have a lot of like white collar processes where you feel like, just taking one example, where there's probably like a lot of generation companies to be built just to solve the workflow problems within insurances. And probably this applies to many large industries that are white collar. And if you take each vertical, probably there should be like a unicorn to be built. Like, I don't know, two organizations, two ERBs that talk to each other currently through humans. Then you take basically, you automate it and have like some kind of like natural language based agent on the one side, one natural language based agent on the other side. In the end, just emails via natural language are like the mutual API, and they basically handshake by pinging back and forth if they miscommunicate, which is kind of cool. Maybe when they kind of detect that it's kind of an agent, they switch again back to like some kind of API, but kind of cool. I just feel like there's a lot to be built.
I think it's not, the question was not mainly about like, is there value to be created? But like, I think there's a case of like, it's getting easier and very, very much cheaper to build software. You don't need a team of like 10 devs at pre-seed stage to build like a proper MVP. So you're able to build way, way more niche software, and a case of it's getting easier and easier to build like a $1 to $5 million ARR company, and increasingly harder to build like a 10 million plus, because at some point you got to expand your customer base, and someone will serve your customer better than you, right? This is kind of, do you have a take on that? Because it's different for you, right? Because you have a horizontal layer, and you're on the infrastructure level, but like really serving like on the app layer.
Fair. If you listen to like the Salesforce launches and something, like people who currently run the process can add the AI tooling to build the generational features. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a good time to probably build 50 million ARR products, which are, as like a builder, are already like life-changing outcomes. So I feel like there's a lot of life-changing outcomes to be built on applications. I don't know whether it's like a $5 billion company, all of these.
Okay, so more lives to be changed. Probably. Instead of like one life with 10 billion. Okay, which is good, I would say. In terms of like, AI is not only there for you because your customers use it in together with your tooling, but also like, how did it change the way that you do stuff internally, and how you think it will even change more in the future? For example, right, LLM-powered IDEs. I don't know if you use any of them. What's your take on that? But also other processes that you kind of automated or just enhanced.
I think in startups you see a lot of like, it's very difficult to personal take. I think like having a mid to senior experienced team makes a ton of more sense now, because every one of these people scales like we can scale each ourselves very well via like AI powered tooling. Yes, you have like Cursor or other kind of like IDEs, but also on the kind of like marketing side, whatever you needed like a freelancer for before, you can now basically do yourself. Or where you need to onboard something who's more junior, you can kind of like automate more things. So you have just way more leverage on many things. So if you can reduce the number of people, you can like go more senior, then you have less meetings, less alignment, because one person just does so much more, like more horizontally and broadly. So it just changes, I think, how early stage startups probably work, because it's less people, more senior, less an urge to hire lots of like junior talent. But then as you scale, you probably need to change this. Personal view that at least in our space this works well, because we need to be opinionated about everything we do. Like API, how do the APIs look like? What's like a good process here? What do we learn from customers? What do we ship next? And if we just follow this kind of like product engineering kind of mindset of one person talking to customers, one person designing, one person, the same person, or the same person building and marketing it, and just split the product like vertically. Like we reduce meetings, we reduce kind of like context that's lost, we reduce the need to like have very strong specs because just one person knows it really well. And then we have like good critique by other people because we don't need to drag like a large team of people that always needs more context and doesn't like move as fast as the top 10% of the organization. So yeah, it's very fun to build right now. I think if you're early stage, and that changes a lot. I mean, I showed you the example of earlier today. I was just like, how do I take a video that's square and get the top 2/3 of it? I know that FFmpeg can do it, but usually it would probably now have taken me, I don't know, 15 minutes. And now with O1, it was like 0 shot in 2 minutes, job done. Probably if I didn't know that FFmpeg exists, I would have needed to take like an After Effects course or something, or hire a freelancer to do this because I have no idea how to do this in QuickTime. So I feel like if you're like semi-technical and use LLMs, it's just so much leverage on everything you do.
When we look at the app layer and people kind of trying to customize the, I would say, like LLM experience for their product, there's several approaches like RAG, fine tuning. Some try to build their own models. What do you say, for which use cases and companies are the different ones the right fit? And how will this also maybe change? And you also maybe your personal view on those alternatives?
I try to generalize, maybe starting with fine tuning, which I try to generalize from us working with like hundreds of thousands of teams and hearing what they do in the different steps and trying to index on these who I would say are more sophisticated or successful. Where the like fine tuning, I think is great if you want to change, for example, the tonality of the application. I know if you want like Gen Z speak, or if you want like always like a consistent use of emojis, or you want like translation to happen very well, or for example, for extraction, if you always have PDF documents, which are, I don't know, electronic medical records, and you always want the same JSON to be extracted, then many of these things work very well with kind of fine tuning, because otherwise, if you few shot with examples in a prompt, then often, again, the response is over-indexed on these few shot examples. Whereas if you take like 100 examples and fine tune on this extraction job, then usually you see better results. Same goes for like then model distillation. If you have a problem where you feel like you wouldn't actually need the memorization or word knowledge of a large model, but you can do it with a smaller, but just the small models don't get your use case well. But if it's narrow, then fine tuning is great. But at the same time, for most prototypes, or like when getting started with a use case, fine tuning mostly makes no sense, because you can just start with like a large model, like latency and quality, latency and cost don't matter. You just need to show that it actually works, and you can somehow prompt engineer it. And then when you see that the workflow works and you have some kind of like product market fit, then you can like optimize on this. So I think for many use cases, just going with big, assuming it gets cheaper, is a good idea when starting out. And then with regards to context management, I mean, in the end, it's kind of like a search problem, a prioritization problem of what you can put in. So in context learning, RAG is great, but I feel like many of the teams we work with either do like the RAG templates of like chat to your knowledge base. But if that's not your business, then often it's way more creative of, I don't know, you have like standard operating procedures for 20 different use cases in your customer support team. You somehow need to find the right SOP for what the user now wants. I don't know, they want to do password reset. Now you need to find the password reset SOP of these are the 10 steps to do when someone wants to do a password reset. How do you find this SOP now? I mean, if it's just 20, then you can probably take a single prompt and be like, is any of these SOP titles good? If it's like 100, maybe then it's like embedding based search. If it's like 10,000, if it's continually growing, maybe you need to like scale this more. But I feel like it's in the end like a context management problem mostly. And training own models, from our perspective, it's mostly in very niche fields relevant, at least within startups or enterprises, where I don't know if you're in bio, adding to a conversation I just had, and want to kind of like predict how you can create some molecules for like some kind of like lab test replacements, like very niche applications. Usually then we see a lot of like new models to be trained, but in our user base, this is not a concern usually. Like it's a lot of pre-trained, some fine-tuning, and then just prompt engineering and architecting the kind of like application around it. I think that's really important to see it as like some kind of like integrated systems of 10 different LLM calls, security checks, retrieval, so many different techniques to try. It's more like architecting the system than architecting the single model, which also makes it very different from like typical like ML engineering, which is very like single model focused. Getting the data set right, hoping that the kind of user input is in distribution to then get like a good output, where now it's like so much out of distribution, so much like multi-step, so much like you try to do reasoning, which is cool, but also kind of new.
What do you think in the future will have like the biggest leverage on AI capabilities? Is it like models growing even bigger, new model architectures, new hardware architectures, combining models, or like interaction with third-party data, reasoning? What's the leverage you see going forward?
I'm by no means an expert on all of this. From my perspective, what's cool is that kind of the promise doesn't need like AGI that just does everything. So we can create a lot of value with what we have today. Then the question is, how does what we have today get better? Where I don't know how far transformers will get us, where like kind of like the people who I like respect a lot doubt whether like scaling will solve all of the problems that we have to get to true AGI. So probably there will be like new architectures coming out. But again, if you use them in like more some kind of like multi-step agentic system, the kind of like engineering problem stays the same of using it probably. When then you try to build applications with it, then it's all of what we already discussed around, depending on the use case, context management or memory management. If you have like a long conversation, like we talk with so many people who want to, for example, do coaching and just have like a 1 hour conversation with a model. It sounds so easy. Like, how do you do like a 1 hour conversation with a model to do some kind of like coaching interaction? It needs to have some kind of like story arc, or you need to remember things from like 10 sessions back, like how to compress memory then over time. If you had like 100 hours of these conversations, like all of these problems don't really go away. So we mostly focus on this.
One last question before giving you all the chance to ask your questions, so get them ready. When I start building with a rack system, do I need a vector database? What's your take on vector databases? And can I do everything with like Postgres, pgvector? What do you see maybe from the experience with the thousands of teams that you're working with? Like what's the de facto standard? Because vector databases are popping up here and there, and also having a lot of traction, but like what do you really need?
I feel like this is a question for a sub audience of people who want to build, I don't know, very strong rack, where for most people, for many use cases, it doesn't matter that much. Because then it's about like the performance of the thing, where, I don't know, like you can use Chroma, for example, or pgvector, and it's like just good enough and not like really an issue. So for example, for myself, if we build like demos, or if I try new kind of architectures, I usually just use pgvector because I know Postgres very well. But then I hear from others that go really deep on, for example, building something more like a Glean kind of product of, I want to now sync a whole like enterprise knowledge-based context and do very efficient kind of search on it. Then some of these more specialized vector data might make sense. Yeah, but I think it's good to keep in mind that like then the vector similarity is just like one way to prioritize what's important from the overall context. And many other filters are more like metadata search, where, for example, I myself would feel very confident in just using like Postgres for it, because then I know it's just SQL. So I know what to do. And then I just use the vector similarity to rank whatever is left. Like I order by the similarity. So it's kind of like nice to use. I think just for most people, it's not really a problem. There's like this one, there was a good post about how many documents you need to have until you need to worry about this. Because if you don't have much, then probably just like keeping all of this in memory is totally fine. I don't know, if you just have like 10,000 documents, then just like loading them on Docker start might be totally fine. So not worrying too much about it.
Thank you a lot. That was the official kind of questions from my side part. Do any of you have questions? We will bring you a microphone. Please just put your hands up and we will pick you and someone will bring you a microphone. Yes. Oh, there was the first one. You're going to be second. I remember it.
Hi, thank you. At what stage of a project would you say it makes sense to integrate Langfuse? So obviously when you scale your product, then it definitely makes sense. But is there some pros and cons to do it early, maybe in the prototyping phase? And yeah, what would you recommend from that?
I often ask myself what kind of, like, what's the point in time that people adopt kind of any solution in this space? Because then we want to build like documentation around this and help people find solutions when they have this problem. I feel like right now, 3 things are good moments in time where people usually adopt tooling or see value in it. One, when you build a lot of prototypes and want to experiment like more on a macro level, like whole different architectures, and maybe use some frameworks for it, but don't really understand what the frameworks do under the hood. So you just need like visibility into what's happening. So visibility into what's happening while in development, while not having like any evaluations or any users. Then second is when you have like strong ideas of what you need to achieve with regards to quality, security, costs before actually going to production. So you then want to have like a good data set, good evals, good metrics to basically prove the point of this is good enough to release, or you basically like work against these kind of evals to get to something that's then good enough to be released, and want to have like a structured way of getting there. Second, and then third is when applications, like if they are low risk, I don't know, if it's like a fun B2C thing and you feel like it's good enough by just vibe checking it on like a couple of inputs and you're like, this is good to go, let's put it on Product Hunt. Then probably like 2 weeks later, you're like, okay, it works for 80% of the people, for 20% it doesn't. Now I need to understand how to improve it. So it's more like I now want to learn from production what works. Use like production user feedback, production evals for like more monitoring, maybe switch to like a cheaper model, and then hope with like an A/B test that people don't complain more, and then maybe inspect when people complain. So I think it's like these 3 things, like visibility, offline evaluation testing, or production visibility monitoring evaluation. And really depends on the use case, what like basically gets you in first. But in the end, we try to build very like unopinionated, and people can build their own workflows around it.
Maybe for context, what's your name and what you're building?
I'm Jacob. I'm building Loopstack. It's LLM-based like coding assistant, or like automation for building code. So yeah, I'm very interested in Langfuse to integrate sometime. So I'm actually interested to know when would be the good point. But thank you very much for your answer.
Thanks. Second question over there.
Yeah, I have the microphone over there.
Oh,
I was wondering, you mentioned.
What's your name and what are you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Christine Pinto. I'm building Epic Test Quest, an AI-powered test management tool, which automates the most boring, repetitive, cost-sinking, and time-consuming task for software testing. That was my tagline. That's why when you ask. I was wondering, you spoke about the developer community who helped you early on, also give you a lot of feedback, finding all the bugs. Did you have that community before you started building that, or did you build it with the community, and how did you keep them engaged that they give you that feedback, basically?
Good question. Like, no, I'm not a person who has like a large Twitter audience, or someone who brings an audience to a product and then bootstraps basically a project based off on like in a community that exists already. So in the beginning, it was like 5 YC companies who were just like, you get what our problem is, we'll use you even though you're not there yet. And one person, I really admire him for it. He was basically just like, guys, can I pay you? I don't feel comfortable using this for free. I want to pay you just so you answer my questions when something happens in prod. Like, I just want to give you money for it, which made us stick with the problem, which was good. Then I think, how did we build a community? The good thing is, in this space early on, like last year, it was very nascent. So we just tried to like integrate to then be useful to people. And there were some people who already had communities. So for example, integrating with Llama Index or LangChain, or for example, partnering with PostHawk. Like, many people are very open to partner. And then you can basically integrate, show value end to end, and thereby tap into other open source companies, kind of communities, and like show them your product and bring them to your community. And then our community early on was a lot like Discord based, but we felt like Discord doesn't really scale that well because like very chatty, like context is lost all the time. And now huge fan of GitHub discussions, where we are like very strong on GitHub discussions, because otherwise if you are like using GitHub issues for it, then it always invites basically like that stretches the project into all sorts of directions, because it always feels like, oh, if this is like a feature request, then someone can contribute it. Where then as a maintainer, in the end, your project does everything and nothing. But we still want to be opinionated about what Langfuse shall do and where we want to focus our time and have good APIs, and not like, I don't know, not go into like a problem space before we have an opinion of what we feel like the process should be. So everything on GitHub discussions, both like support, where, for example, Dosu is great, which is like some kind of like AI tool that auto-responds with like an answer based on technical documentation, and like other GitHub discussions, which scales it really well. And we also do like roadmap discussions on GitHub discussions as well. And what's nice is good API. And we then render it, as mentioned to you earlier, very similar to Postdoc, again, across all of our documentation. So basically, when you look at our roadmap, you see what people upvote on. So you can then upvote on it as well, or add your thoughts to it. And also on support, like, I don't know, if you have questions with regards to evaluations, then we just feature like the last questions people had via GitHub. And then we hopefully don't need to answer that many questions while still serving thousands of teams. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about it. Could talk all evening about it.
Great. Maybe last question, because pizza has been delivered. What's your name? What are you building, and what is your question?
I'm Leo, and I'm building a plugin for Obsidian, which is this note-taking app. And I'm using the WAG approach to have like this chat based on your notes. And I've been using LangChain for this. And to trace all of the steps in the pipeline, I'm using Langsmith, which is the product of LangChain. And I wanted to ask what differentiates Langfuse from Langsmith, and if I should change to Langfuse. Like,
thank you.
Good question. Generally, like the space we operate in, there are like a couple of good products, I'd say. And Langsmith is a really good product, where I think like you see what the products do today, you see like some differentiation around the edges, and you see kind of like maybe a different take with regards to roadmap or priorities, where we just care about nailing this workflow. This is like what we do. We care about it being open source, because we feel like you should own the data. You should be able to self-host if you want. You should be able to have like APIs to do whatever you want around this. And you should rest assured that like thousands of teams depend on this API. So they're like good tests. It won't break outside of major versions. And we will have the most like horizontal, unopinionated way of doing things. So as your kind of like workflow matures, usually like I can tell an anecdote for more like platform teams and like larger companies, usually for like 100 use cases, like 80 of them have like standardized requirements. So like whatever we build with regards to interface is good enough. But then there's always like 20% where you want to build something really bespoke. And if this is your startup, then probably you are on the bespoke end of things. So I don't know, maybe a playground that like an LM Ops tool ships is like a good starting point, but probably you want to build something more bespoke over time to give it to some domain expert to iterate on your prompts better. And good thing about Langfuse is any of the other modules that we offer are all API first. So in the end, if you like remove the UI of the playground and use your own, you can still use the rest of what we've built. So you don't need to like churn the whole product, but you can just churn the one thing where you need to have something very specific while still not needing to reinvent the wheel of all of the other things. So this is like a very vague answer, because like on a feature by feature comparison, many products in this space are similar and everyone is basically currently figuring it out. So our strong stance is this needs to be open source, modular, extendable.
Thank you, Mark. I think that's it. Thank you all for listening. And yeah,